Hi, I'm Thomas Hicks, Chairman of the United States Election Assistance Commission. With the 2018 midterm elections now behind us, the EAC has begun implementing the 2018 Election Administration and Voting Survey, or EAVS. The EAVS is the agency's biannual survey that collects nationwide data on election administration from nearly 6,500 local election jurisdictions across all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the 4 U.S. territories. Pollsters and journalists are already off to the races writing the first draft of history on the 2018 midterms. However, the EAVS allows you to tell the official election administration side of the story. From record turnout levels and shifts in voting methods to registration modernization and changes in election technology, there should be some really interesting things to say, both about how the 2018 midterms were run and the changing landscape of U.S. elections. We know the EAVS can be challenging to complete, so we use your feedback to make it easier for respondents. For example, we streamlined a number of questions and instructions, developed an online survey template, and enhanced our technical assistance efforts, including webinars like this. We sincerely appreciate your work to complete the 2018 EAVS. Your responses are critical to ensure the EAVS provides comprehensive data that can ultimately help America vote. Thank you for all you do to serve our nation's voters.
Welcome. My name is Christy McCormick. I am the Vice Chair of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the 2018 Election Administration and Voting Survey. This is the first of 4 such webinars that seek to provide you with assistance in responding to the survey. We have also released 6 section-by-section boot camp videos that walk you through questions in each section of the survey. The information collected through the EAVS helps the states, the EAC, and the Federal Voting Assistance Program, or FVAP, meet their statutory obligations under the National Voter Registration Act, or NVRA, and the Uniformed and Overseas Citizens Absentee Voter Act, or UOCAVA. The EAVS also helps the EAC meet its mandate under the Help America Vote Act, or HAVA, to serve as a national clearinghouse and resource for the compilation of information and review of procedures with respect to the administration of federal elections. The EAC compiles and analyzes the data collected through the EAVS in a comprehensive report that is released to the public along with a full data set and is submitted to Congress by June 30th each year following a general election. Similarly, FVAP releases another report around the same time using data collected in Section B of the EAVS. The data collected through the EAVS provides a detailed snapshot of how general elections are administered in the United States every 2 years, and countless election stakeholders utilize this data. Members of Congress, legislative staff, and federal officials regularly consume EAVS data to assess how federal election laws like the NVRA, UOCAVA, HAVA, and the Military and Overseas Voter Empowerment Act, or MOVE Act, are working and whether changes may be needed to those statutes. Indeed, my fellow EAC commissioners and I frequently cite EAVS data when testifying before Congress or otherwise speaking to lawmakers and legislative staff. In today's environment of heightened concerns regarding cybersecurity in elections, there are a number of new consumers of EAVS data as well. This includes intelligence analysts, members of the U.S. national security community, and other stakeholders who are working to better secure U.S. elections infrastructure. Journalists, academics, and civics groups also use EAVS data for any number of purposes. For example, EAVS data is used to create 9 of the 19 indicators in the Election Performance Index. EAVS data is also frequently used by researchers and journalists who better seek to understand and inform the public about key aspects of elections. In the lead up to the 2018 midterms, EAVS data was cited by dozens of journalists and researchers to inform discussions on mail ballot rejection rates, provisional ballot usage, list maintenance, and other hot topics that emerged in the elections. Advocacy groups also commonly use EAVS data. This is regularly seen in advocacy and litigation surrounding NVRA provisions on voter list maintenance and voter registration at motor vehicle licensing and social service agencies, and countless other areas. It is not uncommon to find EAVS data cited in legal briefs and judicial decisions. I personally used EAVS data when I worked at the Department of Justice when we worked on election and voting cases. EAVS data is also used by election officials themselves. This year, we've seen examples of state and local election offices citing EAVS data in their training and promotional materials, as well as issue analysis and strategic planning processes. Lastly, we at the EAC ourselves used EAVS data to create research and clearinghouse resources to advance our agency's mission and to better support election officials and the voters that you serve. 2018 marks the 8th time the EAC has administered the EAVS. We're hopeful and confident that the 2018 EAVS will be the best EAVS yet. Building off strong momentum from the 2016 EAVS, we have taken a number of steps this year to improve the survey in 2018 that you will hear about today. All of these efforts serve 3 interrelated goals. 1, to make the EAVS easier to complete. 2, to improve data quality and completeness. And 3, to make EAVS data more accessible and useful. We are particularly interested in making EAVS data more accessible and useful for election officials like you. When you go before your state legislature or local budget authority to push for additional resources or to inform discussions on proposed election policy changes, we want you to be armed with the best data possible about how elections are administered across the country. Finally, I want to mention that a number of states are utilizing the newly appropriated $380 million in HAVA funds to strengthen their statewide voter registration databases. Not only will these funds be used to harden and better protect these databases, but states are also looking to build stronger systems for data collection that we will expect have positive downstream effects on EAVS data quality and completeness. We are excited to be able to provide these resources to the states and look forward to learning more about how states are using the funds to better secure and improve elections across the country. Thank you again for joining us today and for your participation in this important nationwide effort. With me on the panel today are key members of our 2018 EAVS team, including representatives from the EAC, Fors Marsh Group, our implementing partner for the 2018 EAVS, and FEP, our federal partner for the Section B part of the survey. I'll have each of them briefly introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm David Kennan. I'm a Senior Research Program Specialist with the EAC. Really excited to be a part of the 2018 EAVS effort.
Hi, my name is David Byrne. I'm the Director of the Federal Voting Assistance Program, and I applaud the efforts of the EAC and Commissioner McCormick for seeing us through the 2018 administration of the EAVS survey. That's always good for us as well in terms of my role at the Federal Voting Assistance Program, queuing us up for the report to Congress. And I can remember my days as a local election official and working in Harris County, Texas, Fort Bend County, Texas, and actually having to plug in this information. So it's amazing to see how far we've come, and so I'm very excited about the future.
Hi, I'm Krisha Grigorowicz. I'm a senior researcher at the Fors Marsh Group. I was lucky enough to talk with many of our state points of contact earlier this year as part of our needs assessment phone calls. This year will be serving as the project manager for the EAVS project at Fors Marsh Group, leading our team of researchers here as we work with states to collect these data.
Thank you to each of you. I'm glad that you're all here to talk about the 2018 EAVS. Now for 2018 EAVS overview, David Kennan and David Byrne will tell us about some of the main changes that you will see in the 2018 survey.
Thank you, Christy. Based on feedback from election officials like yourselves, we've made a number of changes to the 2018 EAVS that I'd like to talk about here today. As Commissioner McCormick mentioned, these efforts are aimed at, 1, making the survey easier to complete, improving data quality completeness, and making the data more accessible and useful to election stakeholders. So the first change I'd like to talk about is, as Krisha will talk about more later in the webinar, is for the first time ever in 2018, we will be deploying an online survey template that respondents can use to complete the survey. The Excel-based data entry template that we used in past years will also be an option. We're hopeful that this online template will make it easier to complete the survey, particularly in states where a large number of questions are sent down to local jurisdictions. Secondly, we've made a handful of changes to questions about voting technology in Section F. The main change you will see is that we've pre-populated the list of makes and models for commonly used types of voting equipment. This is based on data provided from the EAC's testing and certification program. We know that these questions have been historically difficult to answer, among the trickiest of the EAVS questions, and this has resulted in some data quality issues downstream. With the heightened focus on election technology following the 2016 elections and ongoing concerns of election officials regarding aging voting equipment, we think it's essential that the 2018 EAVS results in stronger data quality and completeness on these questions. We're hopeful that these changes to Section F will lead to these improvements. Third, you'll notice that that we've gotten rid of the supplementary instruction manual for 2018 EAVS. Instead of the supplementary manual, we've embedded these instructions in the survey instrument itself. This will stop you from having to look at multiple documents when answering the questions. Fourth, we've replaced the statutory overview survey, which has been administered alongside the EAVS since 2008, with a new survey that we are now calling the policy survey. This survey is sent to state election offices only, so local election officials who are viewing the webinar will not be affected by this change. Instead of asking states, as we did in the statutory overview, to summarize or cut and paste their state statute on various policy issues related to elections, we're now asking states to select options from a predefined list. This change is expected to generate much more useful data on the policy and administration variation among the states. This will allow the EAC to provide better context for the data your jurisdiction reports through the EAVS. For example, if your jurisdiction has high provisional ballot rejection rates, it would be useful for EAVS data users to also know about your state's rules on provisional ballots, voter identification, same-day registration, and other potentially relevant issues. The new policy survey will enable us to provide more of this context and should make EAVS data more accessible. Finally, I'll close with some comments about our approach to modifying, removing, and adding questions to the survey. While we've made some changes to question order and refined definitions and instructions over time, the questions in the EAVS have remained largely unchanged since 2008. This consistency has made it possible for states to build the data collection systems and processes necessary for completing the survey every 2 years. Nevertheless, the landscape of U.S. elections continues to change, and new issues arise every election cycle. These developments may merit making changes to existing questions or including new questions in the survey. As we consider making changes to the survey, for example, in the area of election security, we want you to know that such changes would be extensively vetted by election officials and that we would weigh carefully the potential value of any new questions against the reporting burden they would put on the states and local jurisdictions. I am pleased that David Byrne from FVAP is here today, as he can tell you about an FVAP-led multi-year initiative known as the Section B Working Group, which helped us remove and streamline a handful of questions from Section B in the survey. David?
Well, thanks, David. And I appreciate your name. It's nice to be on a panel with another David. I will tell you that the Section B aspect of the EAVS survey is critically important to the Federal Voting Assistance Program because it really allows us to understand more from a trending standpoint what's going on at the states in terms of what is causing rejections, what's the individual interaction from a military or overseas voter, how they interact with the election process itself. The improvements we've seen in 2018 is really a culmination that my colleague was referring to in terms of the collaborative effort and relationship between the Election Assistance Commission and the Department of Defense and the Federal Voting Assistance Program to really streamline their efforts, lower the burden of election officials of having to report what was historically a separate survey that the Federal Voting Assistance Program administered. And so in 2016, in partnership with the Council of State Governments, we convened what we call the Section B Working Group to really look at, excuse me, to look at all the questions we were asking and look to reduce duplication. We were constrained in 2016 in terms of what changes could be made at that time. So we really focused on the use of the supplemental instruction to provide some clarification. It's really good to see the enhancements made in 2018 in terms of removing altogether some of those duplicative questions and focusing more on very plain language instructions. It's all very much nice and neat, and it's a well-improved instrument. And we look forward to continuing that effort, that working group, and that collaboration with the Council of State Governments going forward to see what we can do to help the EAC as it looks to perhaps make further improvements throughout the rest of the survey instrument.
Thank you to both the Davids. Krisha, would you please tell us about the process and timeline for responding to the EAVS, and also provide details on the resources that the EAC and the Fors Marsh Group are making available to assist those who are responding to the survey?
Absolutely. Thank you. So, while there have been small changes to the survey, the process for completing the EAVS remains largely the same. However, we do have some new tools and resources that have been created to hopefully make that process easier to complete for our state points of contact, as well as the local election officials who are providing that base level data. So generally, the overview of the process, again, remaining unchanged from previous years largely. First stage, which I hope people are entering now, if not already started, that is collecting data at the jurisdiction level up to the state level. So hopefully the points of contact, those of you who can't collect all the data centrally in your state system, have been reaching out, working with local jurisdictions to start to prepare and collect that data. The second stage then is just compiling that jurisdiction level data at the state level and preparing it to submit to the EAC. That first phase submission, we will then take about 10 days to review, identify any issues with the data, and then work with each state to try to resolve any issues, complete anything that still remains. Then finally, after we coordinate with each state point of contact to finalize their submission, the state will certify the data as their official 2018 EAVS state submission. So in terms of timeline, right now we are kind of in that first phase where data are being prepared and collected, that submission being prepared. That first submission is due by February 1st of 2019. So that should be the complete data set, kind of a first draft. We will then take 10 days, look over the data, identify any missing data, any data that looks a little off to us, and we'll then go back to the state, and they'll have about 10 days to work with us very closely. We'll have our full team of researchers and technical assistants to work with states to resolve any issues that there might be, complete any data that might be missing in that initial submission. And then March 1st is the key date. That is the date by which each state must certify their official 2018 submission to EAVS. We then take that data, and that's the exciting part for us is on the research end, do some analysis. That's about a 3-month process, and like you said, at the end of June each year, these data go into the comprehensive report, which covers NVRA, National Voter Registration Act issues, UOCAVA-related voting issues, as well as just an overview of voting and elections in the U.S. in 2018. So while the process really hasn't changed for 2018, we do have a number of resources available to try to make it easier to complete the survey in 2018. All of these are available on the EAVS portal. That's eavsportal.com, and I believe as well as on the EAC website under the EAVS survey link. So some of the items available for you, certainly a PDF version of the survey so that you can review it in advance to completing the survey. We also have 6 boot camp, called the Closer Look boot camp videos that go section by section through the survey, talk about what the questions are and any nuance to those. And thank you, panelists. A number of you helped us with those, voice those videos. Very exciting. We also have resources related to the Excel template and the online version of the survey. That includes both a manual that walks through, talks about each resource, as well as a video walkthrough version, sort of narrated to demonstrate how those 2 resources work and how you can use them to complete the survey, jurisdiction or the state level. We also, over the last several months, we have done a number of newsletters bi-weekly that kind of talk about a particular topic related to the EAVS. We've been sending those out. Those are also up on the portal, so easily accessible if you don't want to search your email for those. And so this is webinar number 1. We also have a webinar planned in January, and we hope we get additional questions from folks as they're filling out kind of in the weeds. I'm happy to answer that to support those resources. And as always, we have technical assistance available. So we have technical assistance available right now through the EAVS at Fors Marsh Group and email address, and we aim to answer any of those questions that come in within one business day. We've got a number of great ones already. And January 1st through the submission deadline of March 1st, we'll have a phone number available. So if you just want to hop on the line and get immediate responses, that'll be fully staffed, and people will be at the ready to answer any questions or issues that may come up as people complete the survey.
Great. Thank you,
Yeah,
Krisha. And
absolutely.
thank you for Fors Marsh trying to make this as easy as possible on election officials
Absolutely.
as they respond. Now, I was hoping that we could each provide a helpful hint to the EAVS survey respondents. And what would you like our officials to know as they prepare to submit their EAVS data for 2018? We could just kind of go down the row, maybe.
Well, I was going to offer.
You're gonna go? Okay.
I was going to offer mine. Which
Okay,
is,
for sure.
I mean, I would say right off the bat, it's just to take some time and review the PDF document itself and take a full look at exactly all of the data elements, all of the instructions, and spend some time just doing that advanced work. I mean, I mentioned before my experience as a local. You'll always be surprised in terms of the nuance, and there is a method to the madness that I can attest to. It's just not we at the federal level just talking about what we would like to see. We actually use it programmatically. So it's very important to get that good, accurate data. That all comes from just doing that advanced planning to say, okay, I'm going to look at the entire instrument, all the sections, and then just plan accordingly. So that's my big, I think, helpful suggestion is just to read it in its entirety. It's a different look than it was in 2016, a lot more streamlined. And yeah, I think just preparation is key.
Yeah. I guess I would add to that, in actually looking back at 16 a little, last year we sent back validation memos that identified any issues with the data that we had noticed and worked with states. So I would encourage people, look back at the submission from 16, look back at those validation memos. Those can really help serve as a guide for 2018. I think in particular, if there were problem areas with the data, either that you struggled to complete or that sort of you had a weirdness that was identified, take a look at those and that should help guide and prep in the planning process. And by the way, so hopefully you'll have those. I know we have many new points of contact. Please don't hesitate to reach out to our Fors Marsh Group. We can provide those materials to you if you have trouble finding them in your records.
Great. And my helpful hint is that, when in doubt about anything, just don't hesitate to contact the technical assistance team. This will not only help you get an answer to the specific question that you have, but it will also help us identify common issues that are being faced by multiple jurisdictions across the country.
Yeah.
So, in some instances, we may be required to issue specialized guidance that will help people in real time respond to the survey, but it will also inform our efforts to refine questions down the road as we look to make further changes to the survey in 2020 and beyond. And if for some reason your question can't be answered by the kind folks at Fors Marsh Group who are answering the emails or serving in the call center, issues are escalated. So they will be responded to by Krisha here on this table, myself. I may even kick some questions over to David at FVAP if we need additional assistance.
Only as last resort.
As a last resort, yeah. The final level of escalation, yeah. So please don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions. We are here to help you, and our joint work with Fors Marsh Group and FVAP is very much customer service focused, and we want to help you respond to this survey as accurately as possible.
Thanks, David. I'd also like to offer a suggestion, and that is to get started early and take your time with your responses to ensure data quality and completeness. The longer you wait, the more difficult it gets and the more under pressure you are. So do start as soon as you can. Take advantage of the time that we have, which actually isn't a lot of time, but EAVS data is used by the media, policymakers, academics, advocates, and many others, as I had mentioned earlier. So it's much better to identify and correct errors early rather than to see them later in print or on social media. So the earlier you get started, the more quality control you have time for. So that's my hint for getting this done and getting it done well. So thank you to all of you. Now we'll shift to a discussion on some of the common questions that we've received about responding to the survey. So what are the options for filling out the survey this year?
Sure, this is a very exciting new change for 2018. We'll have two options available. So first is that standard Excel template that you're used to. So in 2016, we created what we called the data aggregation template. And that was sort of a wide open spreadsheet where, particularly for our top-down states that just wanted to do a database query and provide that data, let them do that. So that was an exciting innovation. That will still be available for 2018. And the one thing we are very excited about, we've added in 2018, is an online version of the survey. And this is really great for if you're having jurisdictions answer item by item. So that's a very exciting way to do it. So it walks you through, instead of having that heavy macro, which many of our technical assistance calls last year were about problems with the Excel template. So rather than that, moving into the modern age and moving that to an online-based version of the survey. The other thing that would be interesting there is if you are collecting data at the state level, we can actually pipe that data into the online survey so that you can provide it to your jurisdictions to do a check and maybe to answer the few questions here or there that you weren't able to answer at the state level. So those are very exciting options and sort of new options available for 2018.
So I'm filling out the survey, and what do I do if I get to a point where I don't have the data to answer one of the questions?
That's a good question, Christy. And this happens a lot. You know, we would like jurisdictions to make every effort to answer all of the questions in the survey, but we understand there are times when this may not be possible. So when this occurs, it's important for you, when you're filling out the survey, to select the option that flags it as data not available in the template. When you do not have the necessary data to answer a question, please don't enter 0 or simply leave the field blank. In years past, this has led, many respondents have made this error, and this has led to some downstream challenges in analyzing the data. You know, a related issue that jurisdictions have faced is that they are selecting data not applicable when they mean data not available. So please pay close attention to this as well. If you have something in your jurisdiction, the question simply isn't applicable because you're exempt from the NVRA, or you don't have same-day registration, or you don't have provisional ballots, etc. Please put data not applicable. But when you simply don't have the data available to answer a question, use data not available. Thank you.
Yeah, a 0 is very different from a not applicable or not available.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So very important. My state is NVRA exempt, and some questions do not apply to us. What should I respond to these types of questions?
Well, that's a great question, Christy. It's in line with what I was just saying. If you're NVRA exempt and the data is not applicable, please simply select data not applicable. This may be the case for all questions A4 through A8. But it might not be. You know, there are a number of states who are exempt from the NVRA, but they still process voter registration applications through the DMV, potentially social service agencies. So if you are processing them, please provide the data and use the comments areas to describe the specific nuances of your states if you think your data can't neatly fit into the questions as provided.
And they can call also.
Oh yeah, and of course you could call.
Yeah.
We'll be happy to give you the same exact instructions on the phone. If you happen
But
to
if you're
not
unsure,
watch this,
better to
yes.
call than not
Exactly,
call.
Exactly.
Please do. Use us.
Yep.
So most UOCAVA questions are in Section B, but question F1 applies to UOCAVA as well. How is what I report in F1 different from what I report in Section B?
That's a great question. So Section B is focused in strictly on UOCAVA aspects. The F1 speaks to the overall number of voters who are participating in the election, which is still helpful to us because we look at, when we report to Congress, it's based on participation rate. So it's still helpful to us, and we use that as a validation. But the difference in Section B is that we're looking more towards the volume of ballots. And there's a distinction between the voter experience or the voter numbers versus the actual ballots and the traffic and the volume that we get to a little bit more in Section B. So that's the big distinction, is that F1 speaks more towards which are total number of voters in terms of those categories. And then in Section B, we speak more towards the overall volume of traffic and transactions.
So we have a couple of validation questions here. How will my data be validated? And do I need to review all validation items flagged in the data entry templates?
Sure, and this is something we've gotten feedback certainly last year, and I know it's been a kind of prolonged issue and one we're really trying to focus on improving. We want those to be helpful for you. Those validations are there to help make sure that you're able to provide to EAC the most complete and accurate data possible. And we know sometimes we flag a lot of things and people were a little overwhelmed. They got this long list of validation errors and they really couldn't do much with it. That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to provide people with a bunch of validation errors that they really can't respond to. So a few things, and newsletter 4 that went out kind of goes into a deeper dive if you want more information about the validations and how that process will work. But certainly in the online survey as well as the template, we'll have automated validations that will sort of flag things that are missing or that the numbers don't seem to make much sense. They'll certainly be listed on one sheet like they were, at least in the Excel template, will be listed in one sheet like they were in the past, but we're really excited this year we're color coding. So that way rather than going back and forth, you'll know if a cell is orange, that means that there's a math issue, right? That the categories aren't adding up to what we assume the whole are. If it's yellow, it means there's a piece of missing data that we would expect to be there, and a couple other data types that'll be flagged. We're hoping that'll make it a lot easier to actually utilize and respond to some of these. Certainly our technical assistance team will be there if we need to talk through or explain any of them. But a similar process then, when you do that initial submission, we'll run a couple of additional checks. Some of that might be based on what we know about your state, the policies they have, and like have you skipped questions that we presumed that you would skip and not skip ones that we thought you could answer, things like that, noting where perhaps in past years states have had trouble categorizing things, so checking things like that. So those are a little more nuanced and tailored, and we'll then be working directly with the states to try to resolve any issues we see there. But again, always if you're seeing something flagged and you're not quite sure how to respond or you can't correct it, that's what those comment boxes are for throughout the survey. We really do want to know. We know that there are 55 state and territories that respond to this survey, each with their own little nuances, and we understand that making a one-size-fit-all is really hard. We think we got close, but we know there are some places where if you can't respond, please just kind of let us know what's going on in that comment box and talk to our TA team. We're here. Yeah. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
And we definitely read those comments. I mean, if you
Yeah.
take a look at the EAVS report from 2016, you will see hundreds of footnotes. In this hyper decentralized, hyper variant policy and administrative framework in which U.S. elections are run, there's a lot of nuance, and we try to capture that nuance as best we can in the footnotes and in the text itself of the EAVS survey report. So please do use the comment box. We use it a lot, and the folks who use it, the folks who use our data set itself are gonna look to your comments as well to interpret the data.
Thank you. Speaking of variances, this question is more like for the Western states who mail all their ballots to all voters, so including the UOCAVA voters, and then they deliver copies electronically to UOCAVA voters who request delivery that way as well. Do I report the total number of UOCAVA ballots sent, even though it's much higher than my total UOCAVA voters?
We've seen that many times, and you're right in terms of some of the usual suspects, but absolutely, just go ahead and report the total number of ballots that were transmitted. But to Krisha's point, David's point, err on the side of more information than less. So if that's the case in which you may receive a validation message or alert, if that's the case, then provide some helpful clarifying comments. Keep in mind, we've been on the analysis side before we came together with the EAC. Having been on the receiving end and the challenges that the EAC faces here, more information is helpful because keep in mind, once the information's in, the challenge then shifts to those who are doing the analysis. So any helpful comments that might help explain exactly why there's a variance or why there's an alert is helpful, and it will actually probably mitigate some follow-up questions from the lead researchers at Fors Marsh to reach out to the states. Err on the side of more information is better. Go ahead and capture all of the ballots in that instance, but then just help us understand why that is.
Yep.
Okay. So one last question for this particular webinar, and we do request that you send your questions in to us or ask them because there's no stupid question. This one's about automatic voter registration. How do I classify automatic voter registrations in A4 through A7?
That's a great question, Christy. Yeah, so automatic voter registration is a perfect example of how the questions to the survey, how the landscape of U.S. elections is changing, but the questions of the survey have been a bit sticky since 2008. The good news is for automatic voter registration or automated voter registration, depending on what you call it, the types of registration sources through which people are being registered automatically or in an automated fashion are coming from, for the most part, the same entities that you're being asked to report on for the NVRA compliance questions in A4 through A7. Most automatic voter registration, as I understand it, is happening at the motor vehicle licensing agencies. So you can simply put those new registrants who are registered automatically in the category, in the sub-question field for Department of Motor Vehicles. If you happen to be from the state of Alaska and your automatic registrations are coming from the statewide database for the Alaska Permanent Fund, I don't believe we don't have a field for that. So please use one of the other categories to report.
Okay. So that concludes the questions for today's webinar. Let me again thank all of our panelists for joining us here today and for the work that they're doing to make the 2018 EAVS a success. And more importantly, let me thank our viewers for watching this webinar and for all the effort you put in to complete the EAVS survey every 2 years. Your work to collect the data and respond to the survey thoroughly and accurately is critical to the success of the 2018 EAVS survey. If your questions about the EAVS were not answered here today, please take a look at the EAVS newsletters and section-by-section boot camp videos. What else are we calling them? Closer look videos available on the EAVS portal, as well as our upcoming webinars. Additionally, as we've mentioned a couple of times here, do not hesitate to contact the EAVS team with any other questions you may have. We're here to assist you in completing the survey. So thanks to all, and let us know if we can be of any help. Thank you.